Hashem, thank God, we're about to begin a very special chapter. It's a chapter 5 in Tractate Bava Metzia, the chapter dealing with one of the most painful subjects, which is the rebate, charging and interest. The way that the world runs, especially the modern world, we're dealing with lending institution, people and institution. The reality is people need money, and people are willing to pay even sometimes high interest in order either to build their businesses or just to survive. Obviously, there are many halachic, many religious Jewish law questions involved with the taking or charging rebate, interest. It goes both ways. It goes from the institution or individual that's charging, and from the one who's the borrower who takes the money with interest. So first, let's go to the real source in the Torah. There are three sources. I would like to share with you two of them. I'm going to zoom in. One is in the book of Vayikra, Leviticus, chapter 25, begins with verse 35. I'm just reading it word by word in the Torah translation. If your brother becomes impoverished and his means falter in your proximity, you shall strengthen him, regardless if it's a convert or not, so that he, and in that sense can be she, can live with you. The next one is a strong negative commandment. Do not take from him interest and increase, and you shall fear you God, and let your brother live with you. So here, obviously the idea of fear of God is because there are many ways, soon you see it, to circumvent the system and pretend that you don't charge, but you are charging an interest, and it's a strong biblical prohibition. But this one, soon you see, it applies to the lending institution. The lending institution can be either a real established lending institution or individual. Then we have another source in the book of Dvarim, in Deuteronomy, applies to the borrower. And here the text speaks in Deuteronomy 23, verse 20, you shall not cause your brother to take interest of money or interest of food, interest of anything that he may take as interest. And then the end of that statement, just the vignette, the abbreviation, so that Hashem, you God, will bless you in your every undertaking on the land on which you are coming to pass it. Again, in very short, later on you see that applies to the lender. Now, since it's written more than one time in the Torah, the rabbis elaborates on the strong prohibition against both the lender and the borrower from taking this form of loan and interest, and so far that even say that the person will not gain, will not inherit the world to come, and it's like a heretic, someone who rebel against the Lord, who granted or take money, as we said in the high holidays, who shall live, who's not, who will be rich, who will be poor. It's like denying the reality that everything, when it's all said and done, it's come from God. Now, how far you go with that? What is the nuances? For example, if he or she borrow money, but the way that it was borrowed, it was in order to avoid a higher interest. For example, if Reuven goes to Shimon and he said to him, I need you to lend me, for example, 10K, and the other fellow, Shimon, said to him, look, I don't have in my checking account 10K, but I do have in a certain old, for example, CD or money market, and they pay me, for example, 3% in interest. So the question is, if Reuven said to Shimon, well, I'll give you the 3% interest, and you lend it to me instead of lending it to the bank, that's prohibited. We cannot do that. Now, the idea, the Torah used in the Hebrew word, the word neshech, and Rashi explained is noshech, meaning bites. The same snake, the rabbis soon explain, that bite you and may you don't feel the damage, the venom immediately. Later on you can die, God forbid, from that. The same applies to the idea of lending or borrowing against Torah law. So the question is, how, if is a situation of people who need money, who needs the cash, how you can do it in a legal way that it's okay. Biblically speaking, we have one concept, soon we're going to study, it's called ribit ktsutza, which is different form of taking or giving a loan. There is another concept that it's called ribit de rabbanan, rabbinic prohibition against borrowing in a certain way. But there are situations that we allow, for example, heter iska, a certain business transactions that have a setup form, such as banking institution, that is part of the institution is the building of structure in that way. But it's not only money. Soon you see that it's also items, things, can be words, can be avak ribit, which is a rabbinic prohibition against something that it's appealing indirectly, ha'aramat ribit, using an artificial way to charge an interest, and the list goes on and on and on, because soon you see it's a broader question, and as we said, there is a lot of applications. So at this point, I want to make sure that we all understand that people should not derive from this lecture a mean of a halachic decision. If those questions come up, since it can be a violation of one or two or more biblical laws, you should ask a prominent rabbi, a prominent posek that specializes in his erudition in this field of an interest. So we are page 60b at the Mishnah. The Mishnah Kedosha said, Ezehu neshech ve'ezehu tarbit. Neshech, it's the idea of interest, and neshech, the Gemara later said in 61b that that's biblical. Tarbit, it's rabbinic, and the Ritva explained, and others said that it's derivative. It doesn't appear. You do a business transaction and you sneak it in such a way that you don't see it. Example, we have a measures, and nowadays it's much complicated because most of those measurements were digital. So what do? For example, you have a big ventilator, air condition, that you set it up in a way so when the customer put the things on the measure, it bring the weight down in advance. All right? Small example. Can be much complicated with a certain way you measure things. So that's, soon you see it's the rabbinic prohibition. Neshech, tarbit. Ezeu neshech, the first one. Hamalve sela b'chamisha dinarim. A person who lent a sela, it was in those days a coin, that coin was equal to ancient 4 dinars. We use it as an example. Obviously, this is Talmudic, but we can use it, just you change it, for example, here to dollars or to euro, okay? Meaning he borrowed 4, the other guy is supposed to give him 5, right? Next one, Ataim Chitin Beshalosh, who lends 2 se'ah of wheat and he gained 3. So it means that that's a violation of Torah law by gaining 1 more. That's what the Torah tells us, we just quote in Deuteronomy 23, Lo tashich le'achicha, you shall not charge like neshech, like biting you brother, neshech kesef, neshech ochel. And then the Torah Chaim explained, since the Torah adds the word neshech lechol davar asher yishach, anything that applies to biting your fellow, even in a small measure, even the Yetzer Hara can tell you, you know, you're helping him. If he goes to a hard money lender or other institution, he will pay fortune, he pay more. Prohibited, still. Mipnei shehu noshech. Obvious reason, the lender bites the borrower. Because what's he doing? He takes from him more money that he lended him. So far we explained in the Mishnah 1 biblical negative mitzvah, negative prohibition, that it's called neshech, biting, charging interest. And again, soon the Gemara explained to us that that's applied to whom? To the lending, either institution or a person. Now the second category, ve'ezehu tarbit hamarbe beperot. So someone who increases the asset to trading produce of other goods can be in many different ways. So for example, buying, selling, sometimes when you're doing that, they have a certain market price. Those of you familiar, Joe will tell you, right? The stock market. One of the shticks that people use in the stock is knowing information and buying and selling in a certain trade way, in a certain time, in a certain measurement of market values. You know exactly when the Dow Jones and when other things coming up, coming down, and you play that game, and it's always like that one is gaining from this other fellow that's losing, right? So the idea is you take the increase of the produce by knowing what exactly is going to be the market value in a day or in an hour, etc. If you remember, yesterday we discussed a similar situation when you have a confidential or inside information about pharmaceutical company or about a land that's going to be, is no longer freeze that land, and you go to a fellow and you purchase that, and the next day or week it turns to be 20 times higher because they're planning to build there, or they're planning to use this new produce, new pharmaceutical produce, etc. So you're basically taking advantage of inside information to gain something from someone. So there are so many forms of knowing certain thing or doing something with the produce, selling and buying. Here the rabbis came in and said that you have a fixed market, and sometimes by knowing that there's going to be a deficiency in the market, you're taking advantage of someone and you are now in rabbinic violation. It's called tarbit. Keitzad. So here the Mishnah wants to give us a clear example. Lakach emenu chitin bedinar zahav akor. If someone brought a wheat from a seller at the price of gold dinar per kor, just measurement of the Talmudic time, which is a gold dinar being equal to 25 silver dinars, v'chen hasha'ar, and it was prevailing market price, which means the buyer paid for the wheat but did not take immediate delivery, amdu chitin b30 dinarim. So now the price changed, the price of the wheat increased, and they stood of 30 again, they use the Talmudic numbers, but it's the same idea. אמר לו, תן לי חיטאי, אמר לו, רחתך עשויות עליי ב30, והרי לך אצלי בהן יין. And the place you hereby have a claim on me for wine worth 30 dinar. However, ויין אין לו. And the seller has no wine in stock at this time. So what happened? He promised him to deliver later day a wine. So this have a problem. What's the problem? Because the price of wine might increase in the interim. So what happened is, the moment it changed, they said, you have a problem because the transaction is forbidden because it will represent a payment of interest on the 30 dinars that he owes the buyer. So that's called tarbit, since the buyer assets are thereby increases. So as you see, we so far understand it's one biblical, one rabbinic, one it's called neshech, one it's called tarbit, that you have a market price and you have a change of the market price because it's increase. So later the Gemara explains one is a situation that he does have a wine. But the Netivot HaMishpat is a great halachic responsa, have a response over a situation that's similar to that, such as, let's say Joe wants to go to China to do some, for example, fundraising. And he doesn't have the money, whatever it is, $5,000 for 2 weeks trip, hotel, and others. So what did he do? He goes to his friends and he said, Abraham, I'm going to China. And Abraham said, oh, you're going to China? Buy for me a coat. Here is $500. You go to Isaac. Oh, you're going to China? Buy for me these electronics. Here's another 1,000. You go to 5 friends, you have $5,000 of produce that he's supposed to buy for them. He takes the $5,000. He fly to China. He's do a fundraising. He gained $10,000. He bought for $5,000 all the things that his friends ask him. He comes back, he gives to each and every friend whatever they ask with the receipt, and everything is nice. But the question is that considering a rebate? Is that considering an interest? Because remember, originally he doesn't have the money. He took it with the pretenses that he's flying, and it was basically an idea that he collected that fund without their knowledge in order, and he did what they asked him to do. Still, you enter the domain here as an example of rabbinic violation. You remember?
The key is that they weren't honest with them, right? If he had been honest with them and had said, this is the deal.
Right. If he's honest with them, is still by some rabbis called avak ribit. Because listen, the problem is you don't return the money, the exact money without interest. You have here a different form of interest indirectly. His goal was solely to gain money on fundraising or solely to get money for himself. Now, if he goes to someone and says, I need 5K and I give you back 5K with no interest, right? It's a different story. But he went to this...
What if he says, I want the 5K and then brings it back in produce?
Right.
That's a different story. It's a different story.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. If he's honest and says, here's the deal,
that's different.
You're going to pay for my trip,
that's
and
different.
I'm going to bring you 5,000.
It's a book, as I said, it's a book called Netivot, that he deals with that at length. But
so, I mean, it's really, the importance is being honest and upfront.
The key is dishonest, but as we said, that when it's come to this type of interest, people try to circumvent the system or circumnavigate the system. Anyway, so now the Gemara asks question, מדשוויק לריבית דאורייתא וכם מפרש דרבנן. So since the Mishnah, the example that the Mishnah used for the tarbit departs from interest that is prohibited in the Torah, which is the interest or loan. So, because the Torah, if you remember, the way Rabbeinu Hananel explains, they speak specifically about neshech. The tarbit is the way it's called derech mekach, the way you negotiate back and forth. There is a squeezing in another item, it's already tarbit, rabbinic. Michlal deoraita de neshech, ותרבית חד המילתאי, ואקרא הכתיבי נשech, כסף ותרבית אוכל. So, what you see here, the idea, the interest realized through the trade is implied by the Torah law, the word neshech and tarbit, but it's basically the same thing. That's what we said, the increase in lender depend on the biting the borrower, right? So the Rashbam and others have a serious discussion based on that. Let's say Reuven borrowed from Shimon in 1985, $100,000. 30 years later, okay, he wants to pay him. The question is how much? Based on this, it's not so simple. You cannot pay him more because it's rebate, right? It's interest. You cannot pay him less. So, and you agree that 30 years with 100K is not the same value. 100K in 1985 is not 100K in 2016. It's 31 years later, it's a different value. So you go by the governmental measure, you go by the trade measure of interest, you go by the fixed price, you go by the interest rate, you go by the fluctuation of the market. The same is a well-known response of the late Reb Moshe Feinstein, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. Someone bought a house. He took a loan and he bought a house from his friend, and he bought it, let's say, 1985 for 200K. 30 years later, the market value is 250. But the 200K that he purchased with money that his friends gave him carries a different values. The question is how you judge us based on our discussion. It's a long response, but let's go back to our sugya. The Gemara goes also the other way around, because first the Gemara said hakra'ei ktivei. You have a verse that speak about neshech and tarbit. Speaking of neshech, it's money, and tarbit, it's food, because as we said in introduction, can be not only cash, can be valuables that worth cash. Now the other way around. V'tisbera, do you really think the ika neshech belo tarbit, that you lending as a lending institution can exist a case involving biting neshech from the borrower without increasing the wealth of the lender? And the other way around, v'tarbit, and increasing the tarbit, increasing the wealth of the lender belo neshech without biting the borrower? Neshech belo tarbit echei. Give me an example. A case of neshech without tarbit. Example. I de ozfei b'me'a ve'esrim. So he said, someone lend 100, let's say $100 for repayment of $120. But the value of the money then changed during the course of the loan in one of the following ways. Me'ikara kaimei me'a bedanka. Originally, at the time of the loan, the rate of exchange of $100 to a different value, it's called danka. And at the end, at the time of the repayment, L'vasof kaimei me'a ve'esrim bedanka. Now it's 120. So neshech ika, you have here a neshech, you have here the idea of biting. Deka nachitle, because the lender bites in a way the borrower. And he said, Deka shakil minei mida de lo yahiv. But in that he takes back from him something that he did not give him. Vetarbit. But there is nevertheless no tarbit in this case. Leika, the late Ravcha, because the lender had no profit out of the transaction. The danka ozfei v'danka kashak l'minei. Since in lending, in that time, this was the current currency, and took back the same. So you see here a case of neshech without arbit. So the Gemara said, when it's all set and done, if you think soft, in the final analysis, says, I batar meikara azalt. If you go, if you judge the repayment in terms of rate of exchange that prevailed at the beginning when the loan was made, harei neshech v'harei tarbit. You have both. I batar basof azalt. If you judge by the end when the loan is repaid, lo neshechika velo tarbitika. You have neither one. So, אלא אמר רבא, אי אתה מוצא לו נשך בלא תרבית ולא תרבית בלא נשך. When it's all said and done, you have both. Right? So, ולא חלקן, אלא לעבור עליו בשני לאווים. The reason you have it in the two sources, just read it. ותו תרבית בלא נשך מאיך האדמי, היא להוסיף 100 ב-100 מעיקר הקיים 100 בדנקה, ולסוף 100 בחומשה, היא בתר מעיקר הזל, לא נשך איקה ולא תרבית איקה, היא בשר לסוף הזל, תראה נשך ולא תרבית. In short, אלא אמר רבא, אי אתה מוצא נשך בלא תרבית, you will not find a case of the Torah law that they have a neshech without tarbit, nor a case of tarbit without neshech, and the difference term in the Torah, it's ולא חלקן הכתוב, the Torah divided them, separate them, אלא לעבור עליו בשני לאווים, that you have two separate prohibitions. One is the aspect of neshech, and one is the aspect of the tarbit. So it's a violation. One is חיסרון ממון של הלווה, the borrower lost money, and also increased money of the lender. So that's two separate violations שתם מקובצת explain. Now, here is a question that the great Rav Braish asked. You have a non-Jewish bank, a non-Jewish lending institution, and it's in Switzerland. That was the question was asked. And that the Jewish people, as well as other customers, borrow money from that lending institution, and they also lend money from that institution. The problem is that one day a fellow Jew bought that bank. Now, the moment he bought that bank, the question is, it was a fellow Jew that borrowed from that bank in the past, and those who wants to deal with the bank, they can do a teriska, which you're going to learn, a special way to deal with the banking. But those who already have accounts and they already owe money to the old non-Jewish owner, now it transfer ownership to a Jew, that's really an issue of rebit, of charging an interest. So the Rabbi Braish tried to bring, when you have a situation like that, that it was a case of a non-Jewish fellow that borrowed money from a Jew and then he converted to Judaism, and there was a serious question: do you allow to collect the interest now based on the Torah law? How? Because here you're dealing with two different entities the moment he's part of Jewish faith, but it's all based on this sugiyah, because the Torah is very strong with charging a interest. Tanu Rabbanan. So now we zoom in the text. The Torah said, Et kaspecha lo titen lo beneshech, uvemarbit lo titen ochlecha. The way they express it, the Torah said, you should not give him neshech, which means the money, you shall not give him the impoverished, the poor brother, you money for neshech, biting. nor the marbit you shall give food. So the Gemara asks, Ein li ela neshech bekesef. You learn that this applies the prohibition of using money, applying a lending institution that lend money. Veribit be'ochel. And the tabit applies to lending food. Neshech be'ochel minayin. How do you know that is a prohibition of neshech applies to lending food as well? Talmud lomar neshech ochel. The Torah used the term food. So we see from this that the term neshech applies to land or food as well. Ribit bekesef minayin. Which means, Rashi said that it's also the prohibition against playing with that money, meaning to go to a second one, the third one, with using that money. But ribit bekesef minayin, how do you know that is a tabit applies to lending money as well? Talmud lomar neshech kesef. The Torah said over there, and that applies to money as well. So the Khatam Sofer, the great rabbi in Europe, he wrote a beautiful responsa to one of his students. He called him Bchirei Talmidai, one of the best of my students. He inherited money from his father-in-law. And he asked him about Heter Iska, how. So he said that the moment you enter the issue of rebit, of may charge interest, he brought a marshal that said that when you see a fellow that used to do it and he cleaned for Pesach, so he said to him that the moment you clean your clothing for Pesach, it's nice, but as far as the money, that comes first, which means that is a very strong language in rabbinic response. I just use this as an example, that the moment you charge indirectly a hiding fees or hiding interest, you enter to that violation. You should be extremely careful. Page 61, so it looks like superfluous. אם אינו עניין לנשך כסף, שהרי כבר נאמר לו תשיך לאחיך תנאי עניין לריבית כסף. So he can go for the ריבית on money. So the Gemara said, אין לי אלא בלווה במלווה מנין. I understand only the borrower. How do you know that that's applied to a lender? נאמר נשך בלווה ונאמר נשך במלווה. You learn from the verbal analogy of using the word נשך. It's called Gzerah Shabbat, one of the 13 principles of Rabbi Ishmael. So the Torah said in Leviticus 25, Et kaspecha yuman, you should not give him in a neshech. Ma neshech amor balove lo chelakta bo ben bekesef ben beochel. The same way as the borrower, you not differentiate between money and food. Ben beneshech ben beribit, am neshech amor ben malveh. The same applying the prohibition against lending institution or individual. Lo tachalok bo ben kesef, ben beochel, ben beneshech, ben beribit. You shall not differentiate between a case of money and food, between neshech and ribit. Minayin lerabot kol davar. So from where I learned to include a prohibition of interest on loan of everything else. Talmud lomar neshech kol davar asher yishach. Anything that it's bite, which is anything that you have in yan of ribit. The great Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zecher Tzadik Libracha, in his book Minchat Shlomo Chelek Bet, he brings a case based on that. If Reuven borrow from Shimon $1,000, and year pass, and he return his money. Several weeks pass by, and he heard that the situation of the previous borrower is very, very bad. So was he allowed to help him? It's the idea of rebit, which means we know that when you borrow money, by halakha you're not supposed to say thank you. You know that? Because that's, again, it's indirectly of rebit. There is a concept, it's called rebit mukdemet, rebit mucheret, we talk about it. It's a Rav Schwab, he studied by the Rav Yerucham of Mir. So when he went once to him and asked for money, and he said thank you, Rav Yerucham was screaming at him and says, you're not supposed to say thank you because that's part of the issue of rebit. Hakarat hatov, to appreciate the good, that's one thing. But to say thank you is a problematic, as we said, because we're supposed to help each other without direct or indirect form of interest. רבינה אמר לו נשר באוכל ולא ריבית בכסף צריכי קרא. די כתיב את כספך לא תיתן לו מנשר ואוכלך לא תיתן במרבית כדי כאמר. שתכתיב את כספך לא תיתן לו מנשר ומרבית לא תיתן אוכלך, קרי בהכה את כספך לא תיתן לו מנשר ומרבית, מנשר ומרבית לא תיתן אוכלך. So you see that the lender is in violation regardless if it's money, if it's food, it's neshech and marbit. Vatana ne'emar ka'amar. Because you learn this verbal analogy, and Ravina, he's a Morai, he cannot dispute it Tana. הרי כמר, אילו נאמר קרא את כספך לא תיתן לו מנשך, הייתי אומר גזירה שווה. I will say that this is a verbal analogy. עכשיו שנאמר קרא, the way that Ravina said, גזירה שווה לא צריך. So therefore, it's not necessary as a source for this prohibition. So they said, אלא גזירה שווה למה לי? So if so, what the purpose does גזירה שווה, the verbal analogy, that neshech be'ochel and rebit with money, why you need it? So that's, Gemarrah Shava is something that we believe receiving a transmission from Moses and Sinai. So the question is, why you need the superfluous word of nesher, the ritva, you look that. But anyway, he said, nesher, kol davar sheishach, the lo katav bemalve. The Torah did not write in a verse concerning the lender, but only in a verse concerning borrower. So the Gemarrah Shava serves to extend this prohibition to the lender as well. So, one time one of the greatest rabbis gave a speech to a group of attorneys and bankers. So he talked about the lending and the prohibition of lending. So he said to them, people ask if I'm just working for a lending institution, I'm in violation or not. So the rabbi said that it depends on the case, but it can turn in some cases that you are messiah, that you are helping someone who is violating these two Torah laws, and sometimes it's the same as a law of robbery. So as we said, we always have to ask a prominent rabbi when it's involved with lending institution, if you are even by walking there, if you're not in violation. But anyway, אמר רבא, למה לי דכתב רחמנה, לאו בריבית, לאו בגזל, לאו בהונאה? Because the Torah said in different form, the one speaks about taking an interest, one is speaking about not the moment of the giving a loan, but later on. So they said, "Ikatab Rachmana lav beribit mishum dechidush dafilu belove asra Rachmana." The Torah not only prohibited the lending, but also the borrowing. So in our days, it's a very serious question because many businesses based on the interest they're charging people. So the great Hasidic Rabbi Rabbi Bunim of Pshischa, he wrote also Chidushim al Hashas. He also wrote a book of explanation of the Shas. So he bring the chinuch. What's the reason that the borrower is punished? So they said that the borrower also stumbled the lender. The Torah said you should not, lifnei iver, you should not put a stumbling block before a blind person. So the Kol Simcha, Rabbunim Pshischa said, everything you can say that is a stumbling block. So he said that when it's come to lending with interest, you may say, look, this guy, if he's not giving it to me, he give it to someone else. Because that's the formulate of that lending institution. And that, again, it's a violation of Torah law. So the Ikatav Rachmana lav begezel mishum de be'al korchei. If the Torah had written a prohibition only with regard to when it's come to the robbery and not regard to interest and fraud, it's because I will have said that the robbery is unique because it's inflicted upon the victim against his will. It's by force. Aval onaa eimalo. But fraud, which does not involve the use of force, I will have said that it's not included in the prohibition. Vikatav Rachmana lav behonaa. If the Torah is written the prohibition only with regard to a fraud, that is not the other two, mishum de lo yada demachil. So I will say that the fraud is forbidden only because the victim does not even know that he has a claim of to waive. So the robbery and interest, the party that suffers the loss is aware of it and can waive their claim to compensation. So what you see here, the crimes of robbery and taking interest are in this respect less severe than the crime of fraud. And the prohibition can therefore not be deduced from the prohibition of the later. So it was a widow that came to the Tzanzer Rebbe, the Divrei Chaim, and she said, I'm selling apples in the market and people don't want to buy it for me. It probably wasn't the best quality, but anyway, so he felt for her, she was a widow. So he went to the market, he was standing there, and people came, they saw the Rebbe standing there, he says, oh, look at these beautiful apples. And all the Hasidim and the followers saw him, so everybody bought from her a lot of apples. So the question is, the apples wasn't the top quality. But the rabbis explained, it's not considering ona'ah. The reason that people bought it is not because of the apple, it's because the tzaddik, the great man, said that you should buy from her. So it's not considering ona'ah. B'chada mechada lo atya, teite mechada mitartei. So we have one prohibition cannot be driven from another one, but let the prohibition be left unstated and let it be derived from the other two. Hey Tati, which one of the three prohibitions should be left unstated and be derived from the other two? לא לכתוב רחמנא דתורה, should not say לאו בריבית ותיתא מנח. מה להנח שכן שלא מדעת, ומר בריבית שמדעתי. So the Ramban explained that because people, regilut achet, people get used to do such a thing, to sin, and it's always Yetzirah to justify that said, look, that's the circumstance, etc. לא לכתוב רחמנא לאו בונה ותיתא מנח, מה להנח שכן אין דרך מקח ממכר כך. So, because some people argue and said that that's the way people buy. I remember when I lectured once in Florida, so I saw a guy came with a, what is called that car? Bentley. So I asked him, how much is it? How much is the worth of the car? So he laughed at me and he said, you know, in that car dealership, if a customer walk in and he asks how much it cost, you don't sell it to him. Because what happens is there are certain people, they reach certain point when they want something, so for them, prices doesn't make a big difference. There is a certain measure for certain people like that. אלא לא לכתוב רחמן עליו בגזל ותיתי מהנח דמאי פרחת. מה לריבית שכן חידוש, הונאה תוכיח. מה להונאה שכן לא ידע ומכיל, ריבית תוכיח. וחזר הדין לא ראי זה כראי זה, ולא ראי זה כראי זה, הצד השווה שבהם שכן גוזלו. So the mechanism of all of that is what that he robs the other person, what is his. And the same here, it says, Afani avi gezel. So by analogy, therefore, I too can bring forward the case of robbery as a valid derivation. So why then the Torah need to state explicitly a prohibition against robbing when it can be derived from other source? So he said, Amrei, the Gemarrah responds, Hachiname, elalav begezel amali, lechovesh shchar sachir. So the robbing serves to forbid withholding the wages of employee. So basically what happened here, you not really in a way rob a person, but you don't pay him. So is also prohibited. So sometimes, let's face it, you have a predicament. You either borrow money and you pay interest, or another option, you don't pay employees. So here again is prohibition in the Torah not to pay your employees. So here was the problem, as we said. So you have a choice between paying interest violation or not paying employee, which is a violation too. So therefore, we said that's the chidush. Kovesh schar sachir be'ed yaktiv bei lo ta'ashok schar ani ve'evyon. So here the Torah said you should not oppress an employee who is poor or destitute by withholding his wages. So the prohibition against robbery is not needed to forbid this offense. So according to Tosfot, that's the chidush, that you receive malkot. לעבור עליו בשני לאווים. That's the לא תגזול. The Rambam was speaking about a fellow that lived in Egypt, and he asked about the malkot. So he said that the idea of living in Egypt is problematic by itself. But he said to enter there, it's not the same as after he entered and settled there, it's lav she'en bo maaseh. So that's basically the Tosfot question. So לאו שאין בו מעשה, ובכל זאת, anyway, receive מלכות. So it said, ולא כמו בריבית והונאה, ולעבור עליו בשני לאווים. So you should speak about, apply the prohibition against robbery to the offense of taking interest or fraud, and therefore the offender should be liable to transgression to prohibition on the account of them. So why apply the prohibition of withholding wages rather to all of this? So they said, this is one of the 13 principles we said every day. Davar alamed me'inyano. In the prohibition, you shall not rob, is a matter learned from its context. 61b ubinyana lesachir ktiv. So it's written in the context of an employee. So Baal Shevet HaLevi have a discussion with his son. Those who go and collect money for mosdot, for institutions. So think about it. You go with the driver will give you addresses, and those people will give you money. So the question is, the driver said, I want 1/3. I give you all these addresses. I want 1/3 of the income. You go to a rich person. The rich person said, all right, you should tell the driver, I'm giving you 3,000, but I don't want you to give the driver 1,000. So you should say to the driver, I gave you 300. Is that okay or not? Or the rich person said, okay, leave me an envelope and I'll mail you the check. So the question is, the chalot kinyan is for the future or current? That's a response that Shevet Levi deal best on our sugya with his son. So let's finish the sugya. לא תגנוב ותחתה רחמנא למה לי? לך דתניא לא תגנובו על מנת למייקת. לא תגנוב על מנת לשלם כפל. So they said, אמר לרב ירמר לרב אשי, לאו דכתב ארון משקלות למה לי? אמר לי, לטומן משקלותיו במלח. So היינו גזל מעליה, לעבור עליו משעת עשייה. מנחת חינוך, ask, even didn't take the salt from the weight. So, but the whole idea of having a mishkolot in the house is a question, because basically the Tanu Rabbanan תעשו עוול במשפט, במידה המשקל ובמשורה. במשפט is not really משפט, it means all different measurement. So they said that the Baal HaTanya said that even פחות משווה פרוטה. The question is, why is not מלכות? במידה הזו מידת קרקע, שלא ימדוד לאחד מאוד החמה ולאחד מאוד הגשמים במשקל, שלא יטמין משקלותיו במלח. Which means that he put the weight, or lighting the weight, ובמשורה שלא ירתיח. So all of that is example that tricks that people does in order to gain. אבל לא דברים קל וחומר, מה מסורה? אחד משלושה ושלושה בלוג, פיליו תורה, קל וחומר להין וחצין ושלישיתין ורביעיתין בלוג וחצי הלוג ורביעית הלוג. So that's the whole idea of stealing, even in a small measure, that as we said earlier in introduction, you can have a air conditioning or a ventilator, and that causes the measurement to go lower. It's a gezer. אמר רבא, למה לכתב רחמן יציאת מצרים בריבית, יציאת מצרים גבי תסיד, יציאת מצרים במשקלות? The Torah said many times the idea of יציאת מצרים, 48 places, they said that we left Exodus, Egypt. אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא, שתבחני במצרים מטיפה של בכור לטיפה שאינה של בכור, because usually the Bechor is the first one, but can be 10 separate men that have relation with women, and they have 10 firstborn for the son, and this is only God know. So someone who tried to circumvent the system by borrowing money from a non-Jew and then lending it to a Jew. ומי שטומן משקלותיו במלח, ומי שתולה בקל אילן בבגדו, ואומר תכלת הוא, קל אילן is not real one, is indigo. So that's basically Mukher Yosef that is not said that it's not real תכלת. That's what we said in Pirkei Avot. Ayin ro'ah v'ozen shoma, the eye see, the ear, v'chol ma'asecha, and all you did is written in the book. Rabbi Akiva Iger, and the Torah said that when you have pidyon haben, pidyon bechor, peterechem bechor. So why you do it? Because of Mitzrayim. So why you do it bechor me'em and not bechor me'av? So he explained, bechor me'av, Hashem know. difference. מכת בכורות, it was the משחית does. But anyway, רבינה יקלה לסורא דפרת, אמר לרב חנינא בסורא דפרת לרבינה יציאת מצרים בכתב רחמן הגבש רצים. למה לי? אמר לי, אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא. אני משיבחני בין טיפה של בכור לטיפה שאינה של בכור, ואני עתיד לי פרע מי שמערב קרבי דגים טמאים מקרבי דגים טהורים ומוכרן לישראל. אמר לי, ענה מלא, כאשלי, מה ישנה אחא מלא דכתב רחמנה? אמר לי, לכדי תנא דבי רבי ישמעאל, לתנא דבי רבי ישמעאל אמר הקדוש ברוך הוא מלא, לא ילדתי תצא מצרים, אלא בשביל דבר זה, שאין מטעמים שרוצים דיין that God let us out of Egypt, just because to save us from eating this treif, this non-kosher food, it's enough. אמר לי, מי נפי שגראי ותפי מרבית ומציל משקולות? אמר לי, אבל גם נפי שגראי ותפי, מאיסי למכנינו. So דברי חיים מצאנז said, the whole idea of השכלה happened because of that, because they contaminate the body with non-kosher food. But obviously there is a way more to discuss, and we're planning to do it in the next daf in Hashem.